Hey, welcome back to When Bad Things Happen to Good People, a podcast about censorship and the arts. My name's Todd Sullivan. With me, as always, is Oren Barter.
That's me.
And we were reporting from the fiery wreckage of California to complete our journey through the Turner Diaries. Well, we made it. We're done.
We're done.
It's over.
It is over.
The worst is over.
We still have to talk about it.
We still have to talk about it, and we still have to do a wrap-up, but the worst of it is over. And before we talk about it, I have to get something off my chest.
Okay.
I owe you a massive apology for putting you through this. I had forgotten how bad this book was, and I'm so sorry. I have so much respect for your willingness to go through this. I had such a struggle getting through these final chapters. It was a fucking abomination.
Yeah. That's a really good way to put it, I think.
Yeah. So thank you for putting up with this and not tapping out. I
almost did. Like at the beginning there, I think I was very, very close to calling it quits.
Yeah. I was close towards the end here. I was like, I read a bunch and then after one chapter, which we'll get to, I won't say which it is, but I was like, I can't. And I just had to like walk away and take a break for like a day. It was just like, I can't take no more of this. But we made it through somehow.
I don't know. I just nodded my head at you. I don't know why I did that. We're doing a podcast. You're like, yeah, we made it through. And I'm like, you know what, Todd? Yeah, we did. We did make it
nodded
through.
In solidarity. I felt it, though. I felt that nod in my heart. A couple of things I want to talk about before we get to the book itself.
Lay it on
real quickly. There's been some book banning in the news recently, thanks to good old Dr. Seuss. I
don't trust doctors anyway.
You're right. Dr. Seuss should have been around to like write a, why vaccines are good for you book. Apparently the company that publishes Dr. Seuss's books, which is like Dr. Seuss Publishing or Dr. Seuss Incorporated or something, has decided that there's 6 of his books that they are no longer going to publish because of, basically racial insensitivities, things that were kind of okay at the time that aren't so cool anymore.
Yeah, it's like Dr. Seuss was like that, 80-year-old uncle. You're like, he grew up at a different time. It's like, yeah, but he still doesn't have to be an asshole.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I mean, he didn't have the opportunity to get to the modern day and go,
right. Oh no.
Oops, my bad. He died whenever he died.
He was born at a very young age, and then he died when he died.
Sometime later. So, but of course now everybody,
Dr. Seuss,
everybody is suddenly up in arms. Everybody is suddenly up in arms about this fact, and they're crying cancel culture and censorship and everything else. And I think it's important to make that note that no, this isn't a case of anything being banned. A banned book is when like a group or an organization or the government comes in and says, no, you're not allowed to do this anymore. This is a case of a company that owns something saying, we don't want to publish this anymore. Mm-hmm. And as the company that owns these products, that is totally within their right to do. And there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, it's not like I don't even think there was an outcry to cancel any Dr. Seuss books, were there? Like, I don't remember that being like.
It has to do with, so it's connected to, I can't remember what it's called, but it's like Children's Reading Week or something, which is on the week around Dr. Seuss's birthday.
Okay.
So initially it was quite connected to Dr. Seuss's books, but then because of some of these books and some of those racial issues, they've kind of stepped back about promoting Dr. Seuss during the week. And they have had feedback from schools and from learning institutions about some of these books specifically. There was no, to my knowledge, demand that these books be removed, but there was some amount of feedback from these places saying,
the publisher is probably looking at that like, hey, we might be losing sales here. because they're they're all about the money.
Yeah.
So they're like, hey, why don't we just get rid of the 6 worst ones, and then the other 300 we can still make bank on.
Yeah, exactly. There are still plenty of other books out there. I don't know. I don't think The Cat in the Hat is being removed. I don't think One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish is being removed. Everyone knows those are
Red Fish, Blue Fish.
Those are the 2 absolute best Dr. Seuss books. So yeah, I mean it's 6 that are going to be gone, and they're not even pulling them off the shelf. Like they're just not going to be published anymore. So if you need to complete your Dr. Seuss library before this happens, run out to your local bookstore and get them while you can. Before people start jacking up the prices on the black market. Big black market in Dr. Seuss books. But I bring this up in part because I think we're going to take a look at these books in a couple of weeks. I thought it would be, again, they're not technically banned in the way that we normally cover things, but because it is getting some attention in the media, and because I think it might be a nice brain cleanse after this to read a handful of probably mostly okay children's books. I think we
may be very surprised.
The
Turner Diaries might be a fucking walk in the park compared to these things.
That's
we don't
true.
know. I haven't read them.
Horton here's an N-word. But I think we'll do the week after the live episode. I think we'll do a one-off on the 6 Dr. Seuss. So that out of the way, we have to do our quick discussion of what we're drinking.
Right. I stole a Mike's Hard Blue Freeze from my girlfriend tonight because I had a hard day at work, and she had 2, and I asked for 1.
Yeah, she gave you 1 too.
She did. She gave me 1.
Very, very generous of her. I don't know if I've ever had one of those. I think by the time those were a thing, I was out of being able to drink sugary.
Yeah, these are like pretty much syrup. So.
Yeah, and I've always I've never liked Mike's Hard Lemonades. I like the idea of them because I really like lemonade, and I really like alcohol, and it seems like combining them would be a good thing. And yet suddenly they decide to just pour in all that sugar as well, and it's like, this is disgusting. Yeah, I did in fact break out a scotch tonight in celebration of being done this book. I
feel so bad that I didn't I got nothing special. I mean, it's special that she gave it
exactly,
to me.
Exactly.
Damn it. You should have said something to me. I would have went and got something.
Well, I said last week that I was probably breaking out a scotch in celebration.
Oh, I was hardly paying attention last week. I was just trying to get...
my fault.
I was just trying to get through that episode. I was like, yeah, he said some racist bullshit.
But I was gifted a really nice scotch at Christmas time.
Nice.
By my ex's daughter, Chelsea. It's called Monkey Shoulder. Seems like a weird name.
Of course it is. No, that's perfect.
Do you know why it's called that?
Because scotch tastes like a monkey's shoulder?
No, it's the name of a disorder that the people hand stirring the mash for the whiskey would get if they stirred it too much or whatever. Yeah, it's named after that injury they would get. So it's in honor of all the people who probably didn't die but were gravely injured from monkey shoulder.
That would be like having a tennis championship called tennis elbow.
That would be cool.
Would it be cool?
Anyway, it's quite nice. It's quite nice.
Nice.
Notes
it nice?
of
That's nice.
Vanilla and spice. It is. It's and
nice?
It's nice.
It's nice. All right, we're 12 minutes in. Let's get to this piece of crap.
Let's get this over with, right? Okay, so we open. It's July 7th. I think that's about a week or so since we left off. And they've had a huge assault on California. He's staying in this California penthouse, which it's weirdly described. Like, he talks about how this penthouse has taps in the wall, I guess, of you can just get whiskey and scotch poured into your room, which was that a thing in penthouses? I never had a penthouse, I guess.
It should be a thing. That should be
it sounds pretty cool.
That should be a thing in my house.
Meanwhile, there's the dead body of the former owner outside, and also the former owner was, I guess, a pedophile, because there's art on the walls of him having sex with women and men and also children.
Okay.
Just sort of a throwaway little bit there. Looking out over the city, here's a description of sort of what things are going on in California right now. The huge city presents quite a different aspect now from the last time I had an overall view of it at night. The blaze of lights outlining all the main streets is gone. Instead, the general blackness is broken only by hundreds of fires randomly scattered throughout the city. I know there are thousands of vehicles moving down there, but they are driving without lights, so they won't be shot at. So clearly, California is like, some shit has gone down. Specifically, the previous Monday, there were simultaneous attacks across the country from Canada to Mexico and from coast to coast. They knocked out, in California, they knocked out airports, power, water, and took at least 15 police stations. Military bombing each other, I think. Oh, yeah, there were like military planes bombing other military. There was like this chaos amongst the military. And then he bumps into Henry, and we have another. I've made a few more notes about like fun use of exclamation marks. Good old Henry! How glad I was to see him again! Exclamation mark. So while Turner is, I think, working at a broadcast center trying to get it up and running, Henry shows up in a Jeep with an army outfit. I guess they've infiltrated the military at this point. Part of the organization's plan has been to gradually subvert the military and get, sort of a white power control of it.
Right.
Henry shows up anyway at the broadcast center to send a message. Turner says the message was very well designed, and I am sure its effect on both military and civilian listeners was powerful! Exclamation mark. I have no idea what the message was.
Yeah, it was a great. Is the best.
It was
message.
a great message.
People say the organization. Everybody says the organization has the best messages.
Has great messages. Yeah, absolutely. So they ended up in the military. They were trying to. They disarmed the blacks. They got the story spreading that the blacks were mutinying, so they could disarm them, and then. And in some other areas, because there was a story of the blacks mutinying, the blacks did start to mutiny, and it sort of created this division in the military. Okay, so the military was in chaos.
Yeah, so I did take a note of that, and I thought that was especially ridiculous. Oh, it was, yeah. So generally, white servicemen were ready and willing to believe that story and did not need to be told twice to turn their guns against the blacks in their units. Those few whose liberal predispositions made them hesitant were shot on the spot.
Right.
And then he says, after the white servicemen were killing their black brethren, the blacks naturally enough reacted in such a way. Sorry, I got this, to make the mutiny come true. Yeah. That was ridiculous on several levels.
I found that this section starts to get ridiculous. Like, up until now, I think he's done a fairly good job, at the very least, of creating a fairly believable story.
No, okay, that's a stretch.
Maybe, okay. Comparatively. Okay. But, like, things go off the rails in this last section where things just don't make I'm looking at this sense anymore. Like I shouldn't say believable, but let's say
like it's just completely illogical at this point. Like not even an attempt to create some sort of a believable timeline or storyline or anything.
Yeah.
I thought the thing I thought was most ridiculous about this was the propaganda that they used to cause this discord within the military was that the black servicemen were supposedly mutinying, like having a mutiny, right? And so what did they do? They stripped the black servicemen of their weapons and then got the white servicemen to shoot them. Does that seem like a mutiny to you? You know what I mean? Does that make sense? Like they're like they're mutinying. We better get them.
Well, technically, once you have their weapons, they can't really mutiny anymore.
Well, and they weren't mutinying in the first place.
No, but even hypothetically that let's say they were planning to mutiny and you just happened to get the upper hand before they did.
Okay, well that's different. Yeah,
once you get their guns, they're not going to be able to mutiny anymore. You don't have to shoot them after that.
Right.
And these are people who, in this case, these were people who were working alongside these people every day.
Yeah. And they're just going to be like, it seems legit to me.
Yeah, sorry, Roger. Pew pew.
Oh my God. It's so ridiculous.
They say that the police were the only organized opposition because they couldn't infiltrate the police as well, very likely. But they were able to take out the police, and now they need to sort of get the area of California under their control before military backup arrives. We jump ahead to July 10th.
Yes, we do. I guess. I don't know. What page are we on?
Why are you asking? This is the first time you've ever asked me what page we're on.
Well, because the rest of the time I've just kind of been going along, but I actually had some
I've
points
never, ever made record of the pages. So why do you expect me to have them now?
Because the screenshots that I have the pages in there, and that's all I'm going by. I don't.
Well, then you tell me what page we're on. You're the only one who has page numbers.
But I don't know if I'm reading the same thing as you. I'm on 205. I don't know where you are.
So the organization seems to have gotten the upper hand in California, at least in this area of California. They've been running around shooting anyone on sight that's not wearing their armbands. Civilians in the area have been without water and power for a week, some without food for days. I guess
is this the cannibal thing?
I think this comes up in this area. Yeah, I don't think I took a note of that, but yeah, there was a reference to black people turning to cannibal. Oh no, that might be the next chapter actually, because I do think I took some notes about that.
Well, my notes were sparse, so like one swipe in my notes could be a whole chapter. I'm not entirely sure.
There's notes about like people were trying to escape. Then the highways were damaged in the conflict, and so people couldn't get out, and they just created traffic jams. And then people just left their vehicles in the streets and walked home. This is going to be an important point later. Looting eventually started, of course, and of course, as always, this happened first in black neighborhoods. But I mean, I guess eventually even the whites succumbed to needing food and water. And then there's the point that the civilians can't fight back because they don't have guns, because everyone turned their guns in.
Right.
Funny thing about that
is that actually helps the organization.
Well, it does help the organization, but I think there's a contradiction there. At least in some sense. Like, the argument now when it comes to gun control, where it's like, if you criminalize guns, only criminals will have guns. So they're painting black people in this book constantly as being these like savage criminal elements who clearly would have had guns. And yet we're assuming that every one of these black criminals turned their guns in? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Right, but you got to remember, it's not just the blacks, it's the white sympathizers that the organization also wants to kill.
That's true.
That would be uprising as well.
I'm just saying, though, that amongst those civilians, there would be blacks who have guns that could fight back. The chapter ends with one of my favorite sentences in this book. Oops! Exclamation mark. No more time to write now. Have to go to a meeting. That's like the most diary ending of all time. It's like, oop, hey diary, gotta go. Mom called me for dinner.
Oh my God.
God. July 11th. It's that next chapter. Apparently electric power is back on, but it's been rationed. Fuck off. The military hasn't yet sent in support. Because the organization has taken over the Vandenberg Air Force Base and all of the nuclear missile silos there.
Right.
That's a pretty big get.
Do we know? Do we get to learn how they took it over? It's just like, hey, we have all these nukes now.
You know what? I feel like they actually gave a pretty in-depth explanation that I paid no attention to because I just don't fucking care.
Didn't either, so let's move on.
I stopped taking any notes about any of the details because they just go on forever and it just doesn't matter.
And then we took 50 steps east. And then another 10 west.
And then, so similar actions have...
east from where we were.
Shut up. Okay. I'm trying to move forward. Similar actions have been playing out across the country, causing chaos. He finds out that the raid on the Evanston power plant took place and went as planned. The government or the system is trying to figure out the chaos with the military. By the time they have, the organization has taken Vandenberg, and basically they've said, if you move against us, we're going to launch nukes at New York and Tel Aviv. And that was apparently their big plan. was to get that Air Force base and those nukes and use that as a threat against the system. So at this point, they're controlling a strip of California from the Mexican border to about 150 miles northwest of Los Angeles, and from the coast inland for a distance varying from 50 to 100 miles. That includes San Diego, Los Angeles, Vandenberg Air Force Base. Meanwhile, the rest of the country is in uproar. Their hold on California is tenuous, as the military doesn't know how they're being controlled by the organization. Oh, the military doesn't know. Oh, okay, yeah. They're holding California. This was interesting because they're using a lot of military units, but not a lot of the military units are aware that they're being controlled by the organization. And this is, again, where I think some of it starts to fall apart as we go on. Like we were talking about just a few minutes ago about ordering, the military to shoot their black co-workers. And everyone's like, okay, yeah, cool.
Okay.
There's a lot of these things that the military, if they were not completely invested in this plan, I'm not sure that they would be going along with it.
Yeah.
Now it's July 14th.
It's like, oh, where did that? Sorry, you want me to do what? Where did that order come from? Oh, Bill. Oh, I know Bill. Yeah, he's a one-man army.
It's from Henry. Remember Henry?
Who's Henry? No, I thought Bill was the guy.
No. It's Henry.
Henry's the big guy. Big Cajon.
Henry's the big guy. He's the one who's going to make it all happen. Bill's just the printing guy.
Oh, Bill's the guy who's got the wife that's not as good at him.
Exactly.
The one that they both do.
Can adequately run a press. Yeah.
Right. Okay, Henry's the guy that Turner's like kind of in love with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Keeps coming up again and again.
Yeah.
It's July 14th now. Food is now coming into California. They've got 30 distribution points in the, quote, white sections. So they're getting food to white people, at least. There's a long explanation of how they've been rounding up black people that I didn't really want to get into. There's a little aside here I wanted to share that I thought was interesting. I guess somebody calls one of the military guys honky. And so we have a note to the reader. Honky was one of the many derogatory slang terms referring to a white person which was used by Negroes in the 3 decades prior to the Great Revolution. Its origin is uncertain. So they pointed this out, I'm sure, because honky isn't in use anymore. I find that interesting, though, because they didn't have any kind of aside to explain what the N-word meant.
Right.
So clearly the N-word is still in great use.
Even though at the end of the book, there's nothing but white people. Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
But I guess...
Except for China. I guess there's still China at the end of the book.
I guess there's still a lot of people sitting around clapping each other on the back going, man, it's great that we don't have any of those N-words around. Another quote. Once again, it's a damned good thing the civilian population was disarmed by the system years ago. If more blacks had guns, there'd be no way we could deal with them considering the disparity in numbers. And this, again, was where, like,
okay,
these yep.
Black people are the minority in the United States.
That's true. But I mean, it's them compared to the organization at this point.
Oh, okay.
Right, and the organization has small numbers in California. Well, small numbers everywhere.
Right.
At this point. But this, again, was my question about, like, these black people are being painted as criminals. These criminals would likely have guns. Would these criminals have turned their guns in? And if so, does this not then prove that gun control would work? It would just mean that guns would be in the hands of crazy white supremacists, which is not better.
No.
At this point, we find out that some black people have resorted to cannibalism.
Yeah, because...
Which, yeah, I think this must go back to this notion of them coming from these primitive, savage tribes, that kind of... I can't think of the word, but like...
Yeah, it's just racist bullshit again.
It is, yeah, totally it is. And there's another section here where Turner, he sees this spot where, like, he's patrolling this area and these guys come running out and, like, they're retching, and so he goes in to see what's going on, and he goes down the stairs into this basement, and here's another quote. I saw the most terrible thing I have ever seen. It was the butchered and partially dismembered body of a teenage girl. Her blue eyes stared emptily at the ceiling, and her long golden hair was matted with the blood which had rushed from the gaping wound in her throat. So this is a den where like people had been butchering people to eat them. I just thought it was
butchering
interesting
white people. That's
of course the victim here.
Or he made that distinction.
The victim here has blue eyes and golden hair, and again, is a teenager. There's so much, assaults and rape against teenagers because again, this is about trying to paint these people as being just the worst. We find out that whites are not bothering to try to defend themselves for fear of being seen as racists, which again is ridiculous. Yeah. It's like, oh man, this black is like eating my children. This black guy is eating my children, but I can't fight back. Otherwise, I might be accused of being a racist. Like, what universe would that ever happen?
The universe of the Turner Diaries. That's only one.
Another quote here. Another big problem in trying to achieve racial separation is that so many people in this area cannot easily be classified as white or non-white. And that struck out to me because it's like, that is the problem, isn't it? Like, that's the problem. And like, that's the point of the United States. That's the point of Canada. Like, we are these melting pot countries where people from all over come and integrate and interrelate. And yeah, we aren't white or non-white, and trying to divide us according to that is almost madness at this point.
It is. It really is.
So at the end of this chapter, they've got 80% of the blacks sealed in 4 small enclaves, with the first mass convoy heading east soon. And when I heard convoy, I was expecting they'd be like shipping them out on trains or something like that. But we find in the next chapter, it's July 19th. And nope, they're just making them walk. They're walking all of the black, quote, blacks, mestizos, and boat people to the east for 5 days. I wasn't familiar with the word mestizos. It's apparently like an interracial thing, especially of Spanish descent, I believe.
Oh, okay.
Then they're using trucks and vans for the ones who aren't able to walk. And that's
nice of them.
This is where I made the note, though. How are they navigating the roads? Because like just last chapter, I think we talked about how the roads were clogged with traffic that everyone just abandoned in the middle of the streets.
Right. But for the organization, they just move out of the way.
I guess they just moved them all. Yeah, it makes total sense. At the same time, we find out that several thousand white people are coming to California every day. And like, I'm just trying to picture what the border situation is like here, because they're shipping all of these black people out into the system for the system to deal with. Meanwhile, people are just like flooding into California, like the pro-racists or at least the anti-systems are coming into California. Wouldn't there be a border that would say like, guys, we're at war with them. You can't go in there. You're not allowed to go in there. We will shoot you if you try to go over there. Would that not have happened? Like, is it just an unguarded border? I have no idea what's going on.
Maybe it's that whole thing, like, if you mess with us, we'll bomb New York. Maybe they've made some sort of agreement where it's like, okay, right now this is where.
Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah,
that seems like.
But this book isn't really big on the details when it comes to that kind of things. It's big on the details when it comes to racism. But
it's for sure.
No end of details in those situations.
No end. It's July 24th now. Here's another great opening sentence. Boy! Exclamation mark. I'm really becoming a jack of all trades. Jesus fucking Christ.
Dear diary, today I became a man.
He made a repair trip to a big switching station somewhere. That's what he's referring to. On his way back, he bumps into a food brigade, and he sort of gets the sense that there's some amount of getting control in the citizenry of California. There's these groups of teenagers who are going and collecting food and then bringing them back to like distribution points, and everyone's kind of helping out, even though they don't know they're doing it to help a bunch of racist assholes. He also encounters a column of marchers who are being marched north He's not sure of their race, but he points out that this is a separate group from the ones that are being sent east. And then we have the quote, "The clearly distinguishable non-whites are the ones we want to increase the racial pressure on the whites outside California. The presence of more almost white mongrels would merely confuse the issue, and there is always the danger that they will later pass as white. Better to deal with them now as soon as we get our hands on them. I have a suspicion their trip into that canyon north of here will be a one-way affair! Exclamation mark! So yeah, the ones that are very clearly other racial are being sent to the system to sort of bog them down with visible minorities. And presumably to annoy the other, like the ordinary white people there. And the ones who are sort of more hard to tell, they're just being marched north and just shot, killed.
Because that's what the good guys do.
That's what the good guys do. It's July 25th now. They're working with volunteers to create work groups. Some are doing farm work. Some are given uniforms and rifles. And again, they're now arming people who are not entirely invested in what's going on. They're just trying to survive in California. And we're going to start seeing more and more of people who shouldn't be following along with this. And this could, I guess, fall under the umbrella of, you know, the arguments from people who were in, say, Nazi Germany, who, you know, did these horrific things and then said they were just following orders. Maybe that would happen. I don't know.
I mean, if you were afraid for your life, like if they were shooting people who were unwilling to shoot people of a different race, you'd be like,
yeah,
I guess I either shoot this guy or I die. You know, the will to survive is pretty strong.
It feels like that the numbers aren't necessarily on the organization's side. Like at this point, there are more people
opposed to
there who do not, I wouldn't say opposed, but do not necessarily agree with their ideology that would be able to say, no, we're not doing this, and we're going to take your guns now. You know what I mean?
Especially if they're being handed to them. It's like, hey, you know, you look white enough, here's a gun. Yeah, but you're an asshole, so fuck off. Thank you for the gun. Is that what you're trying to say? Like, you think that the tables would kind of turn after a while?
I think they might, but I'm not sure. I mean, it's one of those things where I guess before, you know, Nazi Germany, nobody would have thought that that was something that could have happened either until it did. So who knows?
That's true.
We end this chapter with another lovely quote. "What a miracle it is to walk streets which only a few weeks ago were filled with non-whites lounging at every street corner and in every doorway, and to see only white faces, clean, happy, enthusiastic white faces, determined and hopeful for the future!" Exclamation mark! All right, next chapter, August 1st. This is the chapter that I wanted to just fucking quit after. It's the day of the rope.
Right.
This chapter just fucked me up. Basically, and I tried not to take too many notes here because I was appalled this entire chapter. Basically, what happens is they go through and they're finding all of the. So basically, there's two types of people that they're hanging, and they're going around and they're just hanging people all over the place. And there are people who have betrayed their race and people who defiled their race. And each person is hung with a sign that says either I betrayed my race or I defiled my race. And the ones who defiled their race,
this kind of reminded me of that one scene in The Handmaid's Tale.
A lot of this last part reminded me of The Handmaid's Tale. And it almost felt like this could almost, if it was just slightly different ideology, this could almost be a prequel to The Handmaid's Tale.
Right.
What's interesting is that obviously one book is a cautionary tale, and one book is like a hopeful dream of what could be. And that's a little terrifying. Yeah. Didn't mean to cut you off. Did you have more to say about the similarity to The Handmaid's Tale?
No, it was just the hanging with the notes was very, very similar. Like I noticed that right away. And I think you're right. There is a couple more similarities, but I also did skim this chapter quite quickly. Yeah.
Yeah, the difference in The Handmaid's Tale is that the signs just had images on them because, of course, the handmaids weren't allowed to read.
Right.
So they pulled everybody out. Like they had a list of names that they were going after. Anyone who was slightly colored was brought to the canyon and shot. Anyone who was white were hung either for betraying their race, which meant that they worked in positions that helped non-whites in some way, or defiled their race, which meant that they were in a relationship with non-whites. There's a few references to race traitors, which is another thing that reminded me of The Handmaid's Tale, and gender traitors. They were only killing a small number of white people, but they were trying to like make a point of it. I thought this was an interesting quote.
Okay.
And this is about some of the people that they were hanging. Most judges today, most teachers, actors, civic figures, etc., are not being consciously and deliberately evil or even cynical in following the lead of the Jews. They think of themselves as being good citizens, just as they would think of themselves if they were acting in a diametrically opposite way under the influence of good leaders. I passionately disagree with that. I don't think that these people would think of themselves as good citizens if they were actively working against or even killing black people. I mean, I guess the argument under the influence of good leaders means that they would have been raised in that particular culture, but like, that's just so fucking wrong, I guess. And yeah, through this, I was wondering again, what happened to all of the non-ideologized soldiers, the soldiers who were doing the hangings, like, they don't believe in the same thing as the organization. So why are they? What are the odds that there would have been a revolt at like, let's hang these guys? Why? Well, because they were sleeping with black people. Well, what the fuck is wrong with that? Well, we think there's something wrong with it. Well, we're not going to hang them. So fuck you. And I've got a gun now, so I'm going to shoot you.
I think the argument might have been in the book, at least, that once people saw what they were doing, they agreed with it. I think it's been kind of,
you're right.
It's been kind of a prevailing theme within this book. It's like, he always makes a point, and by him, I mean the writer. He's always made a point that whenever he had a chance to show somebody in this universe showing support to the organization and their ideologies, he makes a point to say like, yeah, well, they're just too afraid to say it, but we're strong enough to stand up. But this is what everybody's thinking. That's kind of his mentality, and I think that's why he doesn't even feel the need to explain it. It's just like, oh, now that we're doing it, like, thousands of people are coming to the border, thousands of white people are coming to the border, and it's not just because they're like, afraid of anything out there. They in his universe, they're coming to the border, coming into California to join them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, no, I think that's true.
Yeah. But still, like, yeah, you're right. This, especially this chapter, is just so fucked.
Yeah. There's a bit where there's a white girl who, she's a blonde, blue-eyed girl, but he does point out that she's a little bit flabby.
Oh, I made a note of that too. Like,
so weird.
Fuck off, guy.
Like, yeah, like she's one of us, but she's not perfect. Like I am. I'm Turner. I'm perfect. She's pretty close, but she's flabby, and also she was like fucking a black guy. And so she's being hung, and she makes the argument, I was only doing what everyone else was. And there's a quote that I wanted to share again. That is a bit of an exaggeration, but it is true enough that had others not set a bad example for her, the girl probably would not have become a race criminal. She paid as much for the sins of others as for her own. Now I realize more than ever before how essential it is that we instill in all our people a new moral basis, a new set of fundamental values, so that they will no longer be morally adrift like that unfortunate girl was, and like the great majority of Americans today are. And that stood out to me as something else that I would have heard from the commander in The Handmaid's Tale.
Right.
Like, we need to tell you what your morality should be.
Well, and that's a prevailing thing in like a lot of more conservative religious sort of thinking too. You know, I mean, I'm no expert on it, so I'm probably just talking out my ass, but that whole, you know, people are evil and we need religion to guide us towards behaving properly.
I mean, yeah, I guess that is a central concept of religion, that that it needs to be what tells us how to be moral.
So it's the same, it's the same thing as, like you say, the Commander in the Handmaid's Tale, or these assholes. It's kind of the same, that same thought process,
but it's,
right?
It's that difference between, you know, letting someone choose who they're going to turn to for their morality, and someone creating a government that's going to dictate a morality.
Yeah.
And I did have a question at the end of this chapter, which was like, why did people end up staying through all this? Which I think is similar to my previous question about why do people go through with this. And I think your answer again, that ultimately Turner is making the argument, the author is making the argument that deep down people agree with this. And once they see it happening, they will be in for it, is kind of the answer to that. Next chapter, it's August 8th, and Turner is now the acting head of the newly organized Department of Public Resources, Utilities, Services, and Transportation. Most of their systems and everything, it was Proust. Yeah. Things are up and running again. There's a blah, blah, blah about how food is being produced and distributed. Who the fuck cares?
Well, no, we do care about that, because it's like, yeah, food's being made and that's important, but I'm even more important because I put the food into refrigerators. I ship the food. If it wasn't for me, everything would fall apart. I'm Turner. Is it William Turner?
Earl.
I'm Earl Turner.
Yeah.
God, even his name is ridiculous.
After noting how nice it is that there are no more people of color around, he says, or writes, and the workers all feel the difference too, whether they are ideologically with us or not. There was a new feeling of solidarity among them, of kinship, of unselfish cooperation to complete a common task. And again, I disagree. I don't think that the average person would feel the difference from a lack of people of color. In fact, I think a lot of people would notice that and be like, "Well, this is fucked up." Meanwhile, the rest of the country is apparently falling apart. They're under martial law. The government has deputized black people, and they're the only ones that are sort of keeping the white civilians under control. Of course, they're probably raping people because they can. The military is still kind of unreliable because the government doesn't know, which of them have been infiltrated by the organization, or whether or not blacks really are going to mutiny, or what. And apparently, again, across the country, most people aren't concerned about the slaughter of the quote-unquote race traders going on in California. Turner writes, the bulk of the population is too preoccupied with its own problems at the moment to shed a tear for the victims of racism. I kind of, again, I disagree. I feel like if hey, the news reports is basically saying, so today in California, it's Nazi Germany version 2.0. People are not going to be like, oh, yeah, whatever.
And you'd be like, yeah, but I got bills, man.
I got bills, man.
I got bills to pay.
I got bills to pay. I don't have enough food.
I think we've seen like the Black Lives Matter protest. People would not be sitting idly.
Apparently, Northern California is a mess. That area is being controlled by a military general, and there's he's not an organization guy.
Yeah, he's just a conservative. Yeah,
he's just a conservative.
That's what we get for trusting a conservative. I was like, well, who the fuck do you trust? He's like,
and so there's some concern that there may end up being like a civil war in California between them, because they're not seeing eye to eye.
Right, because this other guy wants to have an election.
Yeah, he was concerned that not just an election, but he was concerned that like the race traders were executed without a trial. I have a quote here that I was going to read, but I'm not. But it's basically that he's saying that like we tried elections, we tried courts, we tried doing things according to the Constitution, and it didn't work. We need a new system. And so basically, yeah, the argument is that this whole group is anti-America.
Yeah.
America itself doesn't work according to them. They need something different without, presumably with fewer freedoms. August 23rd, Turner is being sent to Washington as part of a plan to distribute nuclear warheads throughout the country. They're concerned that at some point they're going to get attacked at Vandenberg. And in fact, there's a quote here, I think, the system has the capability for launching a surprise first strike against us with high possibility of knocking out all our hardened launch silos before we can fire our missiles. And so before that happens, they want to get these nuclear warheads out to at the first 200 locations that they can remotely detonate as a threat against retaliation from the system. And while Turner is reluctant to leave his quote-unquote white oasis, wonderful phrase, he's excited at the prospect of seeing Catherine again. Oh, those lovebirds.
Was there an exclamation point at the end of that one?
I don't know. I don't have an exact quote there.
Let's just assume there was one.
Yeah, we will assume.
Is this the part where he dresses up like a Mexican person?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So okay. Here's the thing. So
he was Jesus Rodriguez, right? No, Jesus.
No. Jesus Garcia.
Garcia.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Hold on. I am the great grandson of a Jesus Garcia.
Are you really?
I am.
That exact name?
That's his real name. He came from California. He what's the word? He drove cattle from California to Merritt.
Was he Earl Turner?
No.
Sorry.
No, but no, seriously, that was I'm related to a Jesus Garcia, so I thought that
must have been weird for you to read.
It was a little weird for me to read.
Yeah, so this is the problem with the journal diary format is like his first line is like he's been in Washington for a week now, but then he goes back in time to tell us about how he got to Washington. So like my first note is that he's been in Washington for a week, even though that note is fucking completely meaningless for the entire chapter. We get this long, detailed explanation about the trip to Washington. On the way, they hear that there were bombs set off, and nuclear warheads, I guess, set off in Miami and Charleston. They hear a news broadcaster read a message that was sent from the organization, basically telling the government to stand down, stop all retaliation against us, or we're going to start setting off more of these. After the announcement, they're like, shit, we gotta, everybody else has got their bombs in place. Why are we lagging behind? And so they get the lead out and they get to Washington in 20 hours. They plant the first bomb in Fort Belvoir, second bomb in the District of Columbia. The third bomb will go into the Silver Spring area to the north, and the fourth is intended for the Pentagon. Next chapter. Unless you have something else to say about the trip there.
No, it was just
the Jesus Garcia thing.
It was racist.
Yeah, it was.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Is that even worth saying anymore?
They put mud on their face to like look dark or something.
And apparently it worked.
Yeah. September 18th. Shit has gone down. Millions are dead. So is Catherine. And again, this is how these chapters work. It's like he opens with like, oh my God, everything's falling apart. Millions are dead, including Catherine. Let me take a few steps back now and tell you how we got here. And the fucking timeline in this chapter, I don't understand. So he talks about how on September 7th, he had finished installing the third bomb. Mm-hmm. But then 2 days before, they go back to 2 days before when he picked it up on the Monday. And they had trouble getting it to its location because the Pentagon had expanded its security area. And that security area now included their printing shop. So Catherine and the rest of their group were no longer there. And throughout this chapter, and this is where the timeline thing doesn't make sense, I didn't find a point where he actually talked about installing the third bomb. He tells us at the beginning of the chapter that he did, but then we never see him actually get to that point. He ends up going to a refugee camp, but can't find anyone there. Yeah, they're right. This is a great part. He notices a tent with a bunch of black guards outside where they're raping a teenager inside. And he goes and tries to get the attention of like a white military guy, but no one is helping, again, because they don't want to seem racist. And this is not what would happen. Like, stopping anyone from raping somebody isn't a question of racism. It's just so dumb. Then he heads to one spot where he expects some members of the organization will still be, which is the gift shop in Georgetown, where I guess he was initially brought to join the order. When he's going around to the backside of the building, there's this massive explosion, which he finds out was the destruction of Baltimore, 35 miles away. He makes note of the fact that it seems like that was too big an explosion to have been caused by one of their small, I think, 60-ton.
Because, I mean, warheads. Earl Turner is a physicist as well, and he would be able to do the math in his head and be like, I know how big that bomb should have been.
Yeah. So on the news that night, the government reports that the organization had blasted Baltimore and 24 other major cities. The government counterattacked and destroyed the quote-unquote nest of racist vipers in California. But then Turner also tells us this isn't true. He finds out later that Manhattan has been destroyed, killing 14 million people. California's not been destroyed, just the Vandenberg Air Force Base, and 2 missiles hit Los Angeles, but 90% of the people in California survived because they had advance warning and they took shelter, and that's totally how nuclear attacks work.
Oh, God, there's going to be a nuclear explosion. Yeah, get down and cover the back of your head.
Right. Like get under the desk, right?
Yes, it's just as bad as an earthquake.
Meanwhile, there's 60 million casualties across the rest of the country. Apparently, New York was hit by missiles from Vandenberg, but the rest of the cities in the U.S. were hit by the Soviets. And aside from the missiles sent to New York, Vandenberg fired all of their missiles at Israel and the Soviet Union, which forced the U.S. to commit to firing their missiles at the Soviet Union as well, which seems so. I'm feeling like this is a little bit about the era, right? Like in this book was written in the late 70s, right? When the relations between the U.S. and the Soviet Union, now obviously Russia, were not great. And so I guess it's possible that you wouldn't be able to just like get the leader of the Soviet Union on the phone and say, look, I'm sorry. A militant group of crazy racists have taken over California and they launched missiles at you. Please don't shoot at us. But if you want to retaliate at them, go the fuck ahead. There's maybe a reason that wouldn't happen. I can't think of one, but.
Well, it's the whole, we're smart, they're dumb, We're gonna bomb this person, and then they're gonna be too stupid. They're gonna bomb the other person, and then everyone's gonna do our dirty work for us.
But yeah, their argument is basically that once they launched their missiles against Russia, the U.S. had to also launch their missiles against Russia because Russia would then counterattack against the U.S. All of the U.S. presumably, and I don't buy that. It doesn't make sense even in that era. So there were basically multiple benefits to the way this nuclear situation played out. They knocked out, this is again wonderful quotes, 2 of world Jewry's principal nerve centers, being, I think, Tel Aviv and New York. They tipped the balance of power of the system towards the military, because there was, I don't know if we mentioned it, there's apparently been this struggle within the system between the Jewish kind of string pullers who want to, I can't remember who wants what. Basically, you've got the Jewish string pullers, then you've got the military.
Yeah, and they I don't think he ever really gave them a motive. I think he's just like, yeah, they're pulling the strings.
Well, one of them is preferring sort of a standoff situation, and one of them is preferring an assault situation. And I just can't remember which one is which at this point.
Oh, okay.
They also disrupted the system more by provoking the Soviet attack. They ended up with more nuclear attacks on the U.S. than they could have probably done just from Vandenberg. And now, because of the retaliation against the Soviets, they don't have to worry about taking them out after they take out the system. So, all of this is apparently a net positive for the organization. On the downside, they lost about 1/8 of the organization's members, which is nearly 1/5 of the white population of the country. Around here, Turner meets up with Bill and finds out what happened with the rest of the group. Basically, when the security area...
They lost 1/8 of the organization, which was 1/5 of the white population of the country?
You know what?
The organization's numbers are larger than the entirety of the white population.
Let's ignore that. My quote there is probably wrong. Okay. I typed it up wrong. I don't know.
Okay.
I was not proofreading my notes. I just wanted to get through this as quickly as possible.
No, that's fair. That's fair.
Around this time, Turner meets up with Bill, and he finds out what happened with the rest of their group. Basically, what happened is when the security area around the Pentagon grew, people were evacuated out of that zone very quickly. A group of sort of black guards came into the print shop and were like, "You guys got to go." Everyone's like, "Okay, we're going. We're packing up." Some black guy was being obnoxiously sexual to Catherine. Was it Catherine? I think it was Catherine.
It was Catherine. Yeah, this is where she dies, I think.
Yeah, and he tries to feel her up, reaches under her skirt, and she kicks him in the balls, but he's already had a chance to feel the holster that she's had under there. And he's like, "Oh my God, they got guns." And so there's this huge shootout. Catherine ends up mortally wounded. All the black people end up killed. And Bill and Carol manage to get away. But Carol, they end up hiding in an attic somewhere. Carol dies 4 days later. But Bill has managed to survive. Next chapter, it's October 28th. Turner has just gotten back from a month in Baltimore, which this whole thing is so weird because, again, Baltimore has just been in the location of a nuclear attack. But there, everyone's wandering around Baltimore, looting things and not worrying about radiation. This quote early on in the chapter I thought was really interesting. Although more than 2 weeks had passed since the bomb, the state of affairs around Baltimore was almost indescribably chaotic when we arrived. It's been 2 weeks after, the detonation of a nuclear weapon. You think everything's going to go back to normal? What the fuck? Apparently, the survivors near Baltimore are no longer trusting the system, though. It's we don't know whether or not the system bombed us or the organization bombed us, but either way, we're blaming the system for allowing this to happen. Turner was in Baltimore getting these radiation detection things, and they end up forming I don't want to say a base, even though that's exactly what I wrote in my notes, but they kind of create an enclave of homes outside of Baltimore. They've got about 2,000 homes and about 12,000 people there, and they sort of create a little safe enclave for people. They arm about 300 people as militia members, but they got to be careful again about how many they arm because not everyone has been ideologically conditioned. And this, again, goes back to what I was saying before. Turner keeps pointing out that we have people with us now who are not ideologically conditioned, so we don't want to give them guns. We don't want to give too many of them guns. Even though none of these people who are not yet on their side ever try to strike back or ever, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Pardon me. Like, it's weird. And once again, they round up and kill the alien elements and race criminals. And so even though these people aren't ideologically with them, they're happy to murder non-whites.
They murder these are their neighbors.
They're friends and neighbors, yeah. They create work groups to get rid of the bodies. There's a long tirade here about, like, somebody looks at the bodies and it's like, look at these innocents, and Turner goes on this long tirade about how none of these people can be called innocent because everybody has chosen to follow the Jewish ideology and blah, 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 blah. It's just a choking garble of racism. We find out that after the bombing of Tel Aviv, hundreds of thousands of Arabs basically assaulted Palestine, killing the remaining Jewish people there. We also find out that in Russia, the Russian survivors have also started killing the remaining Jewish people in Russia. And it's just like, why?
Because I think fundamentally, as far as the author, who wrote this piece of shit again?
I'm not going to say his name again. I could look it up, but it's not worth
anyway,
sharing.
This piece of shit. His thought process is that deep down, every white person knows what's going on. And
I think you're right. You're right. I did not have that thought, but I think whenever I see these notes about to myself, I think I'm reminded of what you said earlier, and I think you're absolutely right. It's November 2nd, and Turner is getting briefed on national developments. This is, again, I don't fucking know why this guy does this. It's like, I was briefed on national developments. Nothing much has changed nationally. So, like, why did you open the chapter just to tell us that nothing much has changed?
He just wanted everybody to know that he was important enough to be briefed on national developments.
Apparently their biggest problem is there's a clique of conservative generals who are kind of running the system now, and they want to take advantage of the current sort of upheaval in martial law in order to push their own kind of agenda through. And they just sort of see the organization as being in their way. Power is being consolidated at the Pentagon. So they're now planning to assault the Pentagon by dropping a nuclear warhead from a low-flying plane, which they do next chapter.
Because the Pentagon would not have, anti-aircraft or anything like that, would they? Maybe they don't.
Well, they do talk about that a little bit.
Maybe
they say that
because I don't know.
So I think that one of the things they talk about is like they wouldn't be able to use radar to launch anything because it would be under the radar level. And the plan is like, so when they fly in, and I guess we should talk, it is the next chapter where this happens, and Turner is going to be the one to fly the plane in. This is his suicide mission that he agreed to take earlier in the book, for, during his trial, after his trial. They say that basically like his hope is to be able to get it above the Pentagon, but ultimately he may have to just crash it, as close as he can. Like they do acknowledge that he might not get there.
Yeah.
This is a very short chapter. Thankfully, he tells us that it's 3 hours until first light and all systems are go. They've been prepping the plane. This is such a weird thing here. He says he's sad to be ending his life, but he was pleased that he was able to do so much in, quote, determining the ultimate destiny of mankind. And it's the word mankind that seems so weird to me. Like, mankind is everybody.
Mm-hmm.
He's not doing anything for mankind. He's doing for white power kind. And it's just such a weird word choice. And clearly,
he doesn't, like, he dies, right?
Yeah, he dies.
Yeah, so he doesn't know that he's done anything to ultimately change the course of human history. As far as he knows, at this point, he's still in the throes of it. He's still in the fight. He doesn't know what's going to happen.
No, that's true. That's true. But it's the use of mankind that really tweaks me here. And I think it's because what it does is it reduces all other races to animals. Right? The messaging here is that mankind is ultimately just white. Black people, not mankind.
Right.
Jewish people, not mankind. Hispanics, not mankind. And it's
that might be actually, when you put it that way, that might be the most racist sentence in the book.
Absolutely. And
it's not the most overtly racist.
No, but it so stood out to me.
Yeah, no, I didn't pick up on that.
He also mentions that he's finally being inducted into the Union, or into the Order. He's been he went through the rite of union earlier, and then he also says, like, he's been undergoing it for the last 30 hours, and I'm like, what the fuck? What is the rite of union, and how does it take place for 30 hours, and then 2 hours later still? It's like
just a great big orgy.
This is a great big orgy.
Yeah, great big homosexual orgy of all the members.
I'm pretty sure they would not be pro-homosexual.
Not outwardly.
No, okay, fair enough. And then we have epilogue.
Wasn't Harry in the Order?
Harry was in the Order.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe there was a little... I mean, Catherine's gone, so...
He's got to get his rocks off before he dies.
Earl's got nowhere else to turn for a little love.
Earl's got nowhere else to turn her.
Next, we have the epilogue, which is the weirdest spelling of epilogue I've ever seen. EPILOG. And I didn't want to take any notes about this. I was so done by this point. It's just a lot of like, this is how
the same stuff that Earl would say. It's just like, and then this happened from this year to this year, and then this happened from this year to this year.
It's basically an explanation of what happened from Earl's death to ridding the entire world of anything other than white people. The couple of notes that I have is like, there's a race war and food becomes scarce. Of course, black people are resorting to cannibalism. Never white people, though.
No, he actually made a note to say that was a specific... it wasn't just something that he kind of was like, when he wrote it, the black people in the story were cannibals and everybody else wasn't. He actually had a sentence in that book that said, this seems to be a strictly black thing. Cannibalism, Caucasians and Hispanics and whoever don't seem to participate in this. So like it was just an extra low blow for the black. And
yet you've got things like the Donner Party, the soccer team that crossed in the mountains there that they made a movie about. Anyway.
Yeah.
There's these weird, stringent new rules about joining the organization, like, because of course there's the food shortages, and so they want to make sure that they're only giving food to people who are like really behind the cause. So if you are an able-bodied white guy who wants to sort of get into the group and get food, you are sent back out into the world and told to come back with a head of a black person or other non-white person before they will let you eat.
God.
That's some pretty high level entry exams. Basically, the system's military and police forces crumble and are gradually reduced to a number of autonomous local commands focused on looting for food, liquor, gasoline, and women. The large scale conflict between the system and the organizations, it kind of diminishes until they're overwhelmed. At some point, they end up activating a nuclear warhead in Toronto because Toronto has become sort of the next enclave for Jewish people. And what's my last note? My phone just turned off. My phone can't put up this either. They say there's only 11 months from the liberation of North America until the beginning of the new era for the whole planet, which is the point where there are no other races left, just white people. And then there's a bit of a thing about China, which I didn't take notes about. I don't remember how it plays out, but China starts to encroach in the Soviet Union territory now that the Soviet Union has been taken out. And then as the organization begins taking over Europe, China tries to take European Soviet areas, and shit happens. I don't remember. I guess China must get taken out because the book ends with the ultimate happy ending of there are nobody else but white people left. That's it. That's the book. We're done. Guys, don't read this book.
Yeah, please don't.
I'm not even sure you should listen to this podcast about this book. This is one of the worst things I've ever experienced, and I have now, unfortunately, experienced it twice. The one benefit I have is that it is so ultimately unmemorable that I've essentially forgotten my first experience with it, to the point that I felt like revisiting it was a good idea. Yeah, that's it. I don't have anything else to say. I'm glad this is done.
I'm glad it's done too.
Fuck. Let's acknowledge that maybe this won't be the last time we read something that is actually objectionable to us. It does kind of come with the territory, I think, of covering banned things.
Let's just hope that this is the worst of it.
Let's hope that this is the worst thing that we encounter. Yeah, objectionable is fine. In a way, I'm glad that this is not better written. I think, obviously I think it's easier to hide bad ideas in good writing.
Yeah,
and so this at least has the benefit of having bad ideas inside of really bad writing. So there's nothing. I said early on that I think unless you're already of this mindset, you're not going to get drawn into this kind of ideology by writing this book.
And I think you said that because I had expressed the fear of I don't really want to put myself through reading this because I guess I'm of the idea that most people think, and the opinions that they have, they've come to through thought and reflection and not just blinding hatred. So I was a little bit afraid. I don't know what I was expecting it to be. I don't know what a racist book that would make sense to me would be. I can't imagine it. I was afraid that it existed in this book. I am very glad that that is not the case. This book does not in any way paint these ideas in a logical, this is the way things are kind of way. It paints it in, I think, just as ridiculously as it's trying to paint how bad they think. How bad the writer thinks every non-white is,
Yeah. Funny story.
Okay.
I don't know, last week, I guess, I was putting my daughter Morgan to bed. Mm-hmm. And every night we have a little 10-minute period called talk time, which is just like we shoot the shit, we talk about something. And out of the blue, at the start of talk time, she's like, "Dad, why are people racist?"
Oh, really?
It's like, dude, talk time is like a fun 5 or 10 minute thing. This is a rabbit hole. I don't think I have enough time to go down. But yeah, it was funny. And I did take a lot of sort of what I'd been thinking about in context of this book. And I do think a lot of these ideas are not, people don't come up with them on their own. They're taught. Mm-hmm. It's families passing things down. It's peers passing things. It's environment. I think racism stems from environmental issues, but it's also not just that. I think there's, the systemic issue as far as the black people in America are always going to have to deal with the fact that they are, and I shouldn't not say everyone, but many of them are descendants from people that were owned as property. And at the same time, there are also going to be white people who are descended from people who owned people as property and maybe have that. I don't know.
That's still environment. That's still environmental.
But still, at some point, separate from environment, somebody went and sailed across the ocean to Africa and went, like, look at these people. We should own them. And no one taught them that. They just got there on their own and went, you know what? We're better than these people, and we should make them work for us for free. That's not environmental. So it can come, I think, from a non-environmental source. But I don't know. I'm not a sociologist. I'm just some dumb guy with a podcast. Let's wrap things up.
Yeah, let's do it.
You got any final thoughts?
Final thoughts.
This book is a giant piece of shit. That it exists is an insult. That this book exists is an insult to every fucking human being on the planet.
It's an insult to books. It's an insult to words. It's an insult to insults.
It's an insult to the English language. This book almost makes me wish the English language had never been invented so that this book couldn't exist. Thanks for coming on this journey with us. If you did, if you didn't, I totally understand. If you're at the end of it with us and you're like, oh, why did I do this? I'm asking that same question.
At least you didn't read it.
At least you didn't read it. That's all I can say. Where can you find us? You can email us. Email us and tell us that we need to do better books than this in the future. We need to do better things.
We need to be better,
things
Todd.
happen to good people. Be better, yeah. Email us at badthingshappen@gmail.com. We're on Facebook, facebook.com/badthingshappen. You can also find a link to our Discord there. We have a website at blahblahblahmedia.com. You can find streaming links to our podcast there, as well as mostly just that right now, but maybe we'll have other things there soon. If you like what we're doing, you can support us on Patreon, patreon.com/blahblahblahmedia. It would be so nice if someone just gave us like $2 to buy a beer after this fucking nightmare of 3 episodes of reading this book. Someone please just buy us a scotch or a beer or something. For a one-time support financially, you can throw us money via Buy Me a Coffee. It's buymeacoffee.com/blah, blah, blah. I think that's all of our relevant links. You can also find me on a couple of other podcasts. One is called Half-Cut Conspiracies. I get together with my buddy Carlos Sia. I was going to say my buddy Half-Cut Conspiracies. She's not an actual person.
No, it's funny because his Discord name is Half-Cut Conspiracies.
Is Half-Cut Conspiracies, yeah. And we have some drinks and we make fun of conspiracy theories, and it's fun. And then
it's a hell of a lot funner than this podcast.
It is. And I'm also on something called Mysteries and Madness with another friend, Dave Colmine. It's a live play RPG thing where we're doing a 1940s detective story with Lovecraftian elements. We play the game, and it gets converted into kind of a radio play, and it's pretty wild. And Dave does all the hard work on that. Yeah, super well produced. Yeah. A lot of fun. It's like a radio drama. And yeah, you can find that over at Coal Mines Clubhouse is the name of the podcast, I think. I mean, the name is Mysteries and Madness, but I think it's under coalminesclubhouse.podbean.com. But, you find it on your favorite podcast app. That's it. I am Todd Sullivan.
And I am Oren Barter.
And I am looking forward to doing a book that isn't so racist. But until then, go read a fucking book.